Everything seemed normal when President Kennedy arrived at Love Field that fateful autumn day. Everything seemed normal as he was greeted by the usual line of dignitaries. Everything seemed normal as the president moved toward the large gathering of admirers in order to shake hands with the people. Everything seemed normal as the president's Secret Service bodyguards kept their ever-watchful eyes on the crowd. Everything seemed normal as the president's motorcade began its journey. Everything seemed normal. That is, up until this instant. What took place is so odd that we're going to examine the scene 4 more times. Watch the left side of your screen. The arrow points to Agent in Charge, Amory Roberts, as he stands in the Secret Service follow-up car and motions with his hand. What he is doing is calling away the president's 2 most important bodyguards, the bodyguards whose job was to protect the president's back by riding on the bumper of the limousine throughout the motorcade. Watch again as he stands and orders the agents running at the rear of the president's car away. Watch the confusion inside the follow-up car that results. Now watch the right side of your screen. The arrow points to one of 2 agents whose job was to hop aboard the bumper and act as human shields. He's obviously perplexed. Watch as he shrugs his shoulders 3 times in dismay, each shrug more dramatic than the last. As you watch this scene for the final time, ask yourself, is this the kind of conduct you would expect from an agency that routinely sends an advance team to a city a month or more prior to the president's arrival in order to make preparations? Now ask yourself if the assassination could have taken place at all had those men been on the bumper during the motorcade. This is the rear of the presidential limousine. The back bumper is specially designed with a platform on both the right and left sides. There are also handrails on both sides of the trunk. This is where the agent should have been to provide the president even minimal security. The president, unaware of the treachery behind him and the danger waiting for him ahead, continued on to his death. You are about to see segments from 3 of at least 4 films shot in Dealey Plaza of the assassination. The 4th was confiscated by the FBI and has never been released for public viewing. solemn ceremony aboard Air Force One, Lyndon Johnson is sworn in as the next president. With a wink and a nod, what could be called the hostile takeover of the United States government is complete.
Will the nation be all right in a few months ahead?
I just say this. The American nation is a people of great common sense, and they are not going to be stampeded or bewildered.
Many ills have afflicted our nation since John Kennedy's death. The same month he was killed, our once sound as a dollar silver certificate payable to the bearer on demand in real money was replaced by a so-called note, which doesn't promise to pay anybody anything. The year following his death saw the replacement of our lawful constitutional silver coinage with the nickel-clad copper slugs that now clunk together in your pocket. In short, the treasury of the United States was plundered. For more than a decade following the assassination, America was involved in the undeclared, unconstitutional Vietnam War. Over 58,000 fine young Americans died, with hundreds of thousands more injured and maimed. Of course, the greatest crime of the Vietnam War was the abandonment of over 2,000 American prisoners of war, some, perhaps many, still alive to this day. Countless atrocities, both large and small, were committed, all in the name of fighting communism. Perhaps the most prophetic episode of the Vietnam War was the utter destruction of the ancient city of Hue, this done in order to save it. It was saved from the communists, though nothing but rubble remained. During and since the Vietnam War, drugs have flooded into the streets of America. Heroin, processed from the opium poppies grown in the jungles of Southeast Asia, and cocaine in its various forms from South America have turned our city streets into war zones and millions of our people into addicts. The huge profits possible in the drug business have turned what used to be small, isolated collections of delinquents and malcontents into well-financed and well-armed criminal organizations. The escalating lawlessness has prompted ever-increasingly bizarre and extreme law enforcement methods. We now witness the specter of masked secret police on our streets. Military-style armaments, equipment, and tactics are being used with greater and greater frequency. Virtually every community now has its own small standing army, equipped with everything from explosives to submachine guns fitted with noise suppressors. Nancy Reagan was telling America to just say no to drugs, we learned that the CIA had been saying yes for years. Using its proprietary Air America, it smuggled heroin that eventually wound up on the streets of America out of Southeast Asia in order to fund its appetite for covert operations and secret wars. When Eugene Hassenfuss was shot down carrying a shipment of guns to the Contras, it wasn't surprising to learn that an Air America handbook was found in the wreckage. Several independent investigations revealed that the Contras were funded, at least in part, by profits from the drug business. As citizens, we are faced with the unpleasant but undeniable truth that highly placed U.S. officials have participated in and encouraged trade in the poisons that are killing this nation. Our Constitution, the foundation of our nation, has been spindled, folded, mutilated, and shredded by some of the very men who have taken an oath to bear it true faith and allegiance. Far from protecting, preserving, and defending it from all enemies, foreign and domestic, they've become domestic enemies, nearly destroying the Constitution, supposedly in order to save it. In another era, these men would have been hung for treason. The lifeblood of homeownership for middle America, our nation's savings and loans were mismanaged, embezzled from, and systematically looted to the point of collapse. All the while, government agencies either did nothing or actually participated in the thievery. It took 3 years to shut down what some have called the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International, the bank of choice for drug lords, terrorists, and of course, the CIA. And then there's Congress.
I'm afraid that if things continue the way they are right now, the United States is going to be in one heck of a position because there's going to be riot in the streets. That's fact. Because the American dream's gone. The American dream's gone.
Everything is free. Everything is free. Everything is free. Everything is
As America prepares to select the man who will occupy the White House for the next 4 years, we are told by the major media we have 3 choices. One condemns special interests yet panders to every group he talks to. Another is a special interest. And the third, well, he's already made a mess of things. Do they remind you a little of the 3?
What you done for? See what you made me do?
The political spectacle might be funny if our country were not in such serious trouble. We are injured as people, as a nation. We cannot afford 4 more years of business as usual. We need real leadership, and we need it now. We need a leader who is uncorruptible. We need a leader who understands the foundation of America, the United States Constitution, and how to make it work again. We need a leader who understands what the real problems are and is willing and capable of explaining them to the American people, and strong enough to implement long-term solutions. We need a leader whose sole interest is in leaving a free and prosperous nation to the next generation rather than getting elected the next time around, whose loyalty is to principle rather than money, whose concern is for America first and foremost, rather than some new weird order. In short, we need a leader that will heal our injured land. Even combining our three choices together still doesn't make the grade. You do have another choice, America. You may not hear about this choice on the radio. His name probably won't be mentioned on the network news. It's likely you won't see a story about him in the evening paper. Now is the time, and this is your opportunity. Please choose to listen with an open heart. Please choose to consider this man's words with an open mind. Please open your eyes and see the truth. Please choose now and in November, as if the very fate of our nation depends upon you alone. It does.
Well, in a way, we've made history today. You will notice one thing, that the banner, the flag behind us is upside down. We hope you will recognize that that's a distress symbol. And along with our help, your help, what you can do for Bo, maybe we can turn it around. When I was walking Claudia back from the airplane when they landed Friday, we had give her one of our badge pins, and of course she saw the impact of the berets and the t-shirts at the airport, and she says, well, gee, this is nice. Do you think we could take it national? And I said, well, we already did. I was going to bring up one of our bulletins. We already have a full-page ad in the bulletin going across the country, and hopefully people will wake up to this, and wherever Bo goes, maybe there'll be a G team there to wait for him and to be there, and let everybody know that we're coming. Well, let's get on with it. Would you please welcome a real American hero, our next president, James Bo Gritz. Bo, it would be a pleasure for us, the Southern Oregon G team, to present you with your own personal Green Beret.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This isn't the first one I received. The first one was in 1962. It was given by John Fitzgerald Kennedy. But I'm here to tell you that I believe there is more awareness in our heart today about the receiving of this beret, and I hope that you'll take seriously, because what I've seen is the people that design these badges and the people that have adopted this beret, they've done it for a purpose, not just in flippant. That beret is a badge of courage. That beret is never to be dishonored. The beret has been worn proudly by armies before ours. It's worn by the commandos that fought under the British flag for a long time. When we adopted the Green Beret, it was John Fitzgerald Kennedy that said it is a badge of courage. It was unique. We were the only unit in the United States Armed Forces to be authorized to wear such a badge of courage. I hope that you will adopt it as your symbol of courage, that you'll realize when you wear it that you have a calling. You've got a duty today. It's an exciting time. It's not a depressing time. It's not a time of gloom. Rather, it is a time to be thrilled from the bottom of your feet right to the top of your head, because we are coming to the end of a very tremendous era. And with each ending comes a new beginning. And usually it gets dark just before dawn. And so I personally am just absolutely thrilled to be alive today on the face of the earth, not just as anybody, but as an American. Because don't you ever think that you won a raffle in order to be here as an American citizen, the greatest nation on the face of the earth, not boatloads of Americans headed to Russia or anybody else or any place else. You are a blessed people. We are a blessed land. We've been called to serve at a time that couldn't be more exciting than any other period of history. You know, in 1775, our Continental soldiers decided they were going to take a stand. And at Concord and Lexington, there were guns that were fired, there was blood that was spilled, and tremendous patriots, only 3% of them, I might add, rose to the occasion. And some without shoes, and some, I imagine, without powder. And we even had some times when our commander-in-chief wrote back to Washington and said, "Is there anybody there? Does anyone care?" And still they went on. And do you think they were by themselves? Well, I think they had angels. And I think those angels may have been in chariots of fire, because a few went to battle against a many. And King George III represented the greatest force on the face of the earth at that time. And all of those Englishmen weren't wearing red coats. Many of them were professional mercenaries from the House of Hesse and from the House of Hanover. And they stood as professional soldiers against our citizens' army. And by golly, we prevailed. And we didn't prevail because of all of our strength and because of all of our courage. We prevailed because the hand of Almighty God was upon the leaders and upon the people that stood firm in those days. And it didn't stop with that. We had 56 men who had signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. They pledged everything that they had, all that they were, including the risk of their family, of their homes, of their lands, of their future, because they had a vision of something even greater. They had a vision of a legacy where men could come from all over this earth, where men could worship God as they will, where God gave them their right of life, and God gave them their right of citizenship. And they, the men and the women of that time, they formed government to protect those rights that were given by God and not by men. And finally, in 1789, they had a constitution, and it was the very first time in the history of the world where a people recognized the fact that it was from God that we receive our rights. Back in Cicero's time, when they had a great Roman Empire, it was the Caesars that gave out privileges to people. And then later on, when you had even the various treaties and acknowledgments by the kings, they, the monarchs, were giving privileges to people. But in our time, in our history, we, the people, finally recognized that we were created by God, and we are not greater than the Creator. And we created government, and the created should never become greater than the Creator. And that's the way that it was finally in 1791, when we had a Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights simply guaranteed the rights already given to us by God Almighty. And our generations came forth, and we had great men. We had Thomas Jefferson, who said that it was wrong in order to leave your posterity in debt. Thomas Jefferson said, if the banks ever take over the currency and credit, your children will wake up as slaves on the continent that was conquered by their fathers. And we had men like Andrew Jackson, the hero of the battle in 1815 of New Orleans, where we defeated the British for the second time. And Andy Jackson ran for president, and as he did, he called the federal banks that had grown up around the government in spite of Jefferson's admonishments. He said, "You are a den of vipers and thieves, and by the power of the Almighty, I'll rout you out." And he did. And when Andy Jackson left office, there was not one penny owed by any American to any foreign power or to any bank. The debt of the United States was zero. And it wasn't Reaganomics that led to a $1 trillion debt by 1981. Because when I was born in 1939 in January, the debt of the United States was $18 billion. That's not much when you take a look at this great land. But 40 years later, that's all, it was 1,000 billion. And then 8 years later than that, in 1989, it was 3,000 billion, or $3 trillion. And you've ought to almost be left in awe. What has happened? How could we go from nothing at a time of Andrew Jackson and have 18 billion just before World War II, and suddenly have $1 trillion by 1981, and 8 years later it is tripled again, and it's now 4 trillion. And do you think it's going to get any less? It will not get any less under the Republicrat system of government. Republicrats are one party with two names. And there's nothing wrong with being a Democrat or Republican at a local level. But you must agree that at the presidential level, it is Heckle, it is Jekyll. It is no longer a case of the lesser of two evils. It is the case of the evil of two lessers. Because we literally today have a case where it must look stupid to people in foreign lands. I was watching CNN just before I came over to this event, and there were the latest polls. And H. Ross Perot is leading both Bill Clinton and George Bush, and not even Perot knows what he stands for. But people will vote for anybody, or they will vote for nobody before they'll vote for George Bush, which now his ratings are 37%. Only 18% of the people in America have any faith in him with his economic policies. That is lower than any president since they've been keeping any kind of records. And yet people say they'll vote for Bush before they will Clinton because they don't trust the Democrats. And then Perot comes up and honestly has absolutely no platform, and America clamors. But he does have $100 million, and I've heard you can buy anything in this world for money. But there are some things you shouldn't be able to buy. And one of them is the office of the Chief Executive of the United States of America, because it is we the people that appoint that person.
Just who is James Bo Gritz? Those wishing the definitive account of his life might want to read his autobiography called To Serve. Bo's life can be summarized in 4 words: courage, honor, loyalty, and dedication. Though he is America's most decorated Green Beret commander with 62 citations for valor, he is best known for his unceasing efforts at finding and returning the prisoners of war left behind in Southeast Asia. First officially, then unofficially, he has searched for his missing brothers. The Colonel comments on the situation in the following segments from an interview broadcast in the mid-'80s.
I was chosen to do it.
Chosen by whom?
Well, by interest in the government. I think that's kind of an old story now. My point is that I don't hang around the State Department. I don't find the State Department hanging around Southeast Asia. If it weren't for a great humanitarian reason, I would have long ago put this down. The fact is that Americans are there. I have tunnel vision on it.
I have a lot of information about it, and I intend to pursue it until we have the living proof here so that there can be no doubt. Hopefully then the government will accept total responsibility and get the rest of them home.
Why doesn't the State Department do it themselves?
Well, probably Congressman Doran could answer that better than I, but I can see economic reasons. I can see an outrage in America in paying ransom, $3.25 billion to the communists. I can see that if we were to pay that ransom, that it would provide the communists with a wherewithal that they might even be able to continue the domino theory coming across the river into Thailand and on down through the other countries.
Now, if in fact you listen to Bo Gritz, who says he knows 2 Americans, why don't you leave the studio and take him up to the Hill and get a group of people saying we've got to do something about this?
He is anathema.
Rather than leaving it to him, calling on spiritual help from the American people.
Well, he's anathema at the Pentagon now. I've been told to avoid him. I don't avoid any Vietnam
Why have
heroes.
you been told to avoid him?
Because he has operated independently, and they act at the Pentagon like we've got another 12 years
Not a good
to solve
soldier.
this. And I think he is a good soldier, and I don't avoid any
No, I don't mean,
Vietnam hero.
he's not a
Well, that he
good
won't,
soldier
that he
in the
won't
sense
shut up,
following
go
tradition.
away, go get a job somewhere, and wait another 12 years. I've run out of patience, too.
So what do you say? This Time magazine, 1984, said Gritz is either a genuine American hero with the courage of his convictions or a publicity-seeking egomaniac who is not dealing with a full deck.
Well, Albert Einstein said that time was for people that couldn't think. I don't know how other than that to respond to time. I'm bulletproof when it comes to critics, because I wouldn't be doing this. I would have quit long ago. I don't have a job other than finding prisoners of war. I don't make any money off of it. My family, if it were not for a great humanitarian reason, would have probably left me. But they sustain me because they understand. And it hasn't been all outside the government. Every one of the cases, except this last one, I've been in lockstep, and I'll stand by to give Congress their report on...
See,
I'm out of time.
I know the government sucked
Okay.
him in, then they cut his legs
All
off.
right. Come back. We'll keep up with what you're doing. Robert Doran, thank you very much.
Undaunted, Bo continued his unofficial efforts to locate and rescue American prisoners of war. The trail led to a drug lord, and the results were shocking, as Bo explains in this segment from the Mort Downey Show.
That when you brought up the fact that you were going in to see General Kun Sa, and that he indeed had been shipping and is shipping 1,200 tons of heroin every year into the United States of America, and we had an opportunity to make a deal, we turned it down. Is that right?
That's exactly it, Mort. It was most disturbing to me because we didn't go to see Kun Sa about drugs. We went in cooperation with the White House. Tom Harvey, a would-be Ollie North lookalike, was the NSC staffer that asked us to go. It was to find prisoners of war that reportedly Kun Sa was holding. When we got there, we found out that he had no prisoners, but we couldn't leave without asking him why he insisted on shipping this poison into the world. And Kun Sa said that the U.S. had been his best customer for more than 20 years. Well, I didn't believe it. This was December of 1986. He said that he was willing to stop 900 tons in 1987, and then he said, I will disclose every U.S. government official that I have dealt with in the last 20 years. We brought those videotapes back and gave them to the White House. And 4 days later, we got that response. Tom Harvey called and said, Bo, it's fantastic. You guys are the first Americans ever to go in and come out alive. And I said, Tom, what about the deal to stop 900 tons? That's fantastic. And he said, Bo, there's no interest here in doing that.
I don't understand this, Colonel, all right? Here's what I don't understand. Why would this general volunteer to stop sending 900 tons of heroin? He must be making a hell of a lot of money from it.
Kun Sa has 8 million Shan people in an area about 1/3 the landmass of Burma that he's taking care of. The only crop that he is allowed to grow is poppies refined into opium, morphine, and heroin. He wants to legitimize the economy of that Shan land so he can become a true nation state, and he knows he can't do it if they're dependent on drugs.
What was his deal that he offered?
He offered a deal to stop every ounce of heroin, 900 tons last year, 1,200 tons this year, and divulge U.S. government officials if Reagan would agree to give him a trade mission to the free world where he could start using some of the resources they have there to make other money. If we would send over Peace Corps operators, if we would do just a number of little things to get him economically off of dope and onto a legitimate economy. Seemed to me like a good deal.
So here's the thing that I think is important.
He also offered to give this last March 15th 1 ton of refined heroin to Vice President Bush as a show of his good faith. And you know what the State Department said?
Well,
We're not interested.
I would imagine they'd say that right about now Bush could use it. Colonel, were you ever able to ascertain any of the names of the officials?
You betcha. And what happened is I've got a letter here that Kusa wrote to the Justice Department on the 28th of June, 1987. And if I can read just 2 sentences real quick. It says, during the period 1965 to 75, CIA chief in Laos, Theodore Shackley, was in the drug business. Santo Traficante acted as his buying and transporting agent, while Richard Armitage handled the financial section with the banks in Australia. And he goes on. Now, Armitage, as we speak, is the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs under Carlucci, who was a Deputy Director of CIA, and of course Bush was Director of CIA.
Are we going to make American as cocaine and cocaine as American apple pie is, my friends? You're going to find out next. The Colonel will remain with us. We're going to dig deeper tonight. Stand by.
Sadly, Bo's message was largely ignored, and the show turned into the usual screaming match.
How many cocaine users were there?
Start to do that, my
How many cocaine users were there before 1950?
First of all, in 1930, because of strong public opinion.
They should have been talking about the U.S. officials involved in the drug trade, but you see where the conversation went.
Because of strong public opinion, cocaine was muted. It was brought down. The 50s and 60s, your time came along, pal, and they began to experiment again. And then we got into the problem we're in right now. I'm using his argument.
A new drug out there called crack cocaine. There were 20,000 users prior to that.
Despite attempts by the U.S. government to silence him, Bo continues his quest to bring our missing prisoners of war home. As you will see in the following segment from A Current Affair, broadcast in May of 1992, he remains at the forefront of this effort. As you will see a little later, he's expanded his quest to include the restoration of constitutional government to America.
Each year at this time, our nation pays tribute to the generations of servicemen and women who died fighting for the flag they loved. For one American family, this Memorial Day will be like no other, because they have just been given some incredible news about a hero they thought perished in the jungle of a far-off land. He'd always been listed killed in action. Now, as Steve Dunleavy tells us, another war veteran has reclassified him as missing, presumed alive.
Fighting soldiers from the sky.
Yes, there are prisoners of war alive.
Fearless men who jump and die.
I got an eyewitness account of my father being alive.
Men who mean just what they say.
Bring him home now! Bring him home now!
The brave men of the Green Beret.
We will bring them home. God bless you.
If guts were made of gold, then this man would be a billionaire. His name is Bo Gritz, a warrior who fought the good fight. And long after a war called Vietnam was over, this warrior still fights the good fight.
We intend to bring back living prisoners of war, so we don't have to talk about it anymore. If it's true, we'll know it very soon.
And there are many who say that Bo knows. The much decorated Green Beret who quit the military to go back into the jungles of Southeast Asia to find prisoners of war is now fighting even a harder war to win.
Because I was chosen to go in search of my brothers, and I found them there, and I haven't been able to bring them home yet, I am not going to quit.
And one of his brothers is this man, Albro Lundy, an Air Force pilot shot down only 12 days before he was to come home to his family and only son.
I've been behind communist lines 10 times since 1983, 6 times setting up these operations, 4 times actually executing them. And in every case, at the last moment, when we should have had our arms around our brothers, something has always happened.
This T-shirt is a photograph of 3 live POWs.
His name is Albro Lundy III. a California lawyer. He doesn't remember his father. Up until now, the only time the ghost of his heroic dad appeared to him was when he passed this wall, the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C.
The government told me for 20 years that he was dead. And I believed the government. They said there were people that saw him die, and we said fine. And we never investigated it.
But this photograph could be haunting evidence that Albro Lundy's father is not only still alive with many of his comrades, but still a prisoner of a war that ended 17 years ago.
That is my father. That's him in the photograph. And so I knew it was real. That's when I said, I have to tell my mother. So I gave her the photograph, and she said, Albro, leave the room. And my wife and I went in the other room, and we sat down to pray. And less than 2 minutes later, my mom calls me back in, and she says, well, that's your father.
In brutal terms, hope always reigns eternal when people do not see the coffins of their loved ones. They wish to believe in miracles. But this man, Tim Wilson, has put it in cold scientific terms.
The point is that we have a person here who absolutely is Albro Lundy's father in this photograph. So therefore, how could he have died in the airplane crash?
And that's what Albro Lundy wanted to find out when he brought his father's picture to Wilson, a forensic scientist.
What we're going to do is we're going to dynamically overlay the picture of Mr. Lundy in the MIA photograph with the picture of Mr. Lundy in the fishing camp. Now what we're doing is we're going in and we're going to absolutely measure all of the features in the individual. And as you can see, I'm getting the information out of all these dots of information, even the curvature of the nose, the bridge of the nose, the distance between the pupils, the distance between the teeth, the nose to the chin, the eyes to the nose. All of these dimensions empirically match up that these individuals are in fact the same. It is Mr. Lundy in both cases, yes.
The picture was smuggled out of Vietnam and was reportedly taken 3 years ago. But why would the Vietnamese keep the prisoners? Lundy believes the Viets are holding them as a bargaining chip to get U.S. aid.
If the U.S. find that they kept prisoners of war after the war ended and killed them, I mean, I don't think the American people will ever forget Vietnam. But if they release them, all the family members and the American people will say, let's do business as usual.
The war ended a generation ago. But for Bo Gritz, there will be no peace until those missing in action are returned to the home of the brave. And Albro Lundy will have a dad again.
I have no enmity against the Vietnamese. I have nothing but forgiveness. I mean, if my father is released, the first thing I'm going to say to the Vietnamese is thank you for keeping him alive for this long. Thank you very much that you didn't kill him.
Albro Lundy is planning another trip to Southeast Asia later this year to find out his father's fate.
The one message that I have for you, because I'm a presidential candidate, and it's rather strange that a normally decent person would volunteer to get dirty wrestling with the hogs in the political sty. But I was asked by the Populist Party, first of all, back in September, if I would be a presidential candidate, and my initial instinct, like yours, was to back up. But then I started thinking about it. You know, I raised my hand and I took a sacred oath of allegiance. That oath wasn't to surrender. The oath wasn't to lie. The oath wasn't to cover up. The oath was to bear true faith and allegiance to the United States of America. That's you. And to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, in what I think of all the areas I've been sent to. I speak Swahili. I've served in Africa. I've served in the Middle East. I've served in Asia. I commanded special forces in Latin America. I've been all over this globe fighting wars that this nation or the government thought was right. There is one thing fighting for, and we're here right now. This is what's worth bleeding, and if necessary, worth dying for, right here in the USA. And so I had to assess the situation, and realizing, as an intelligence officer who spent most of my life behind the veil of national security, I realized that there isn't going to be another opportunity in 1996 to build an American party or to try and overthrow a new world order or global government, I truly realize it must be done within the law in 1992. And failing that, it can still be done within the law, but it won't be done through politics. The simple fact is that the Constitution, which lies hermetically sealed today in the National Archives, breathing its last breath, hanging by a thread, it needs life support systems. If that were to be dashed, to be pulped, to be burned, would it make any difference? Where does the Constitution live? The Constitution lives right here in the heart of every American who knows what his birthright is, where our rights come from. They don't come from government. They don't come from documents. Our rights come from God. And if you will continue, and if you'll read the Constitution, if you'll read the Bill of Rights, if you'll know what it is that you need to be defending, friends, it never dies. And it is the supreme law of the land. Now, I have a document packet that will be available for you. The good people of Washington literally bought them all up while we were there before we came here. But in the document packet, you'll see such things as I'm going to talk about here tonight. And one of them is the fact that the Senate in 1954 decided that a UN mandate was supreme even over our Constitution. Does that mean it's so? It doesn't, because the Constitution is the supreme law of this land. What happens if the Congress, what happens if the President, what happens if the Supreme Court suddenly declare the Constitution and Bill of Rights null and void? Does that mean it's null and void? There are three sovereignties that we have. You have a sovereignty given to you by God Almighty. No document, no one can take that right because they didn't give it to you. God gave it to you. We have a sovereignty as a state. Wouldn't make any difference if all other 49 states suddenly hauled down the stars and stripes. And I believe if God has a flag anywhere on the face of the earth today, this flag is it. And if they haul it down, does it mean that Oregon has to go ahead and haul its banner down also? You may decide that you'll want to run up a banner beside it, and I would suggest the banner that says, "Don't tread on me." Because the fact is, you have a sovereign state here, and the state is part of the United States, but you still have a sovereignty no matter what those turkeys do in Washington, D.C. And even if the legislator of the state of Oregon were to haul down the stars and stripes, does that mean that you as individuals suddenly go belly up and say, "Beam me up, Lord, it's getting too tough for me here"? No, it means that you occupy, you stand, you network yourself together as a sovereign people, because we are the ones ultimately responsible for the life of the Constitution. Now, I very frankly am a Christian. I don't care what your religion is, you ought to be very happy that you have a Christian running for President of the United States, because Christian principle says God will judge you. I will not. You may live your life as you will, and it will be God that will judge you for it. My job as president is to make sure that you have liberty under the Constitution, that you do not have tyranny. And I don't know if anyone here would think that under a new world order you will have God-given rights. Very clear under the new state's Constitution, the world Constitution, that the rights come from the United Nations, which are just simply made up of powerful men. And so we are going to stand. We will either stand, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we were able to stand as a nation? Because you can't deny and I'm not trying to suddenly be a preacher. I'm not a politician. I'm not a preacher. Let's make it very clear. Politicians belong on the bottom of the ocean with whale droppings. And every international banker and almost every lawyer that you could probably think of. But this is Saturday, and we're getting close to Sunday, and so I think I'm safe to say that when, as an intelligence officer, I would be remiss if I did not use documents that have been proven to be true in the past, because they do have prophecy in them, do they not? And those prophecies are coming true today in more abundance than ever before. We're seeing a wonderful time on the face of the earth. I say I wouldn't have been placed upon this earth at any other time. We could have been born in the Dark Ages, not much going on, maybe except a little inquisition. But here we are at a time when we are just about to have perfect government, I believe. You know, and just reviewing it a little bit, again, I don't mean to get religious, but I talk by the Spirit. I don't have any prepared notes. And you know, that's something you ought to ask George Bush just one time, or Bill Clinton, or H. Ross Perot. Stop reading from the 3x5 card and just tell me what it is that's in your heart, or what it is that's in your mind to say. We don't care if they flub words. We speak the same language. We know what the thoughts are. They can transmit those thoughts and feelings, can they not? But when I look at what's happening in the world today, there's no question. Is there a global government that is building just like a tsunami that would literally crash over all continents, all nations? There is. Is there not a one system of economics that is forming? Already it has formed, has it not, in Europe? They call it the EEC now. There are no more borders. They're all just one continent. And isn't it growing? Do you think it was some kind of colossal coincidence when all of a sudden the Soviet system just went belly up, and not even Jean Dixon, with the use of her crystal ball, could forecast that that was going to happen? Friends, that wasn't coincidence. That wasn't just magic. What is the antithesis to free enterprise? You see, along with being the very first people in the history of the world to have our rights given by God, where we the people make a government, we also had a thing called free enterprise. You hear it always described as capitalism. Capitalism, friends, is Ma Bell. It's ITT. It's General Motors. It's Monkey Wards. But what really has made America great? It is free enterprise, where you as an individual, with the talents God gave you and your willingness to work, could go out, and if it was nothing more than selling apples alongside the road, you were supposed to be able to do that without government interference, without outside interference. That was your ability to make your own fortune as you will. Now that is the thesis. What is the antithesis? It is communism. Who bought communism? In 1917, the World War was almost over, but Jacob Schiff from Kuhn and Loeb Bank in New York City, a subsidiary of Rothschilds, which had Europe already under control, gave Lenin and Trotsky $20 million in gold to buy up the Bolshevik Revolution. And you might wonder, why would an American purchase communism, which is in direct antithesis to our style of life? And the reason is, it's called Hegelian theory, because the synthesis is developed out of the struggle between free enterprise and communism. And what is this synthesis called? The New World Order. So when you see communism going belly up, don't be led into these commentators that say, yay, good for Latvia, good for Gastonia, good for all of these countries. They just can't keep those freedom-loving people down. When communism goes belly up, friends, you'd better look at the other end of the spectrum. What has happened to free enterprise in America? As an individual, You can barely exist right now as a private business person. There are so many government regulations. There are so many taxes. There are so many certificates, so many agencies you have to go through that if you aren't some kind of international corporation funded by the bankers, you can't afford to have the dental plan and the health plan and all of these other plans that slowly breed slaves. You know, we roared for liberty, didn't we, 200 years ago? What are we doing today? You know, I notice on bumper stickers driving around, national health care now. And I notice in Washington, D.C. today, as people are marching, we want the government to give us more now. You know what happens? We roared for liberty, and today we're whimpering for security. And there is a trade-off, because before we stood on our own and basically could tell government where to go and where to pack it. But when you get on your knees and lick the hands that feed you, all of a sudden you find yourself a slave. And isn't a slave have perfect security? Oh yeah. The slave doesn't have to ask if he's got a job. He just works where they point and show him. The slave doesn't have to ask what they're going to eat, because they're fed at the appropriate time. The slave is provided a bed. Is that what we want in the United States of America? It is what our founding fathers were willing to bleed and died for. As I look over this room, I don't see a lot of what I would say are natural Americans, meaning American Indians. Most of us came over, probably our ancestors on the Mayflower. Some of us came over on slavers. We have one thing in common today. We are Americans, and we are a body. And like a family, don't we fuss and fight all the time? We do. You've got preachers, and I think they're right in doing so, carrying signs that say, down with homosexuals. And you've got gay liberation rights over here screaming and hollering for what they think is right. And you've got pro-lifers, and you've got pro-choicers, and you have environmentalists, and you have lumber producers, and you have all these people with a different voice. Friends, some of us can be ears, some of us noses, some of us fingers and toes. Some of us are going to be anal orifices. But you try to get along without one. You've got to have them. It is part of the body process, is it not? Now, the point I'm trying to make to you is this. We can be like a family, we can fuss and fight, but if you're a peace officer, you never want to be called to a family feud. Because when you arrive on the scene, they usually all turn on you. Today, we need to stop being labeled. So many times, someone will come up and say, Bo, I would love to support you, but I'm a liberal, you see, and you look like Attila the Hun to me. Or they say, Bo, I'd love to support you, but I'm pro-choice and I understand you're pro-life. We've got to strip the labels away. Who here has ever been stampeded by rabbits? Bar no one. Good. Jimmy Carter, he's the only person I know in recorded history that ran from a rabbit. If you'll remember they had the rabbit that jumped out at him when he was fishing in Georgia. Normally, people are not frightened. They are not stampeded by rabbits. That's precisely what those who would steal our birthright want us to be. And by dividing up into all these little fractionalized groups, I'm for the snail darter. I'm over here for the spotted owl. Well, I'm for the desert tortoise. I can't support you. With all these different groups, that's what we are. We must come together as just Americans. That's what we are. We're not right, we're not left, we're not liberal conservative, we're not Democrat Republican. We've got to stop the division. We must stand as Americans. If we do not stand, we're going to deserve what we fell for. So we're going to do what is right, and we have made the platform based on what is right, without any consideration for political action committees or special interest groups. For example, it doesn't take any kind of genius. I'll bet you that all of you have already figured out what is wrong with America. Now, if you have an automobile that will not run, you try to find the thing that is most wrong, probably to fix first. If you're ill, you try to find out what it is within your body that has got you down. The cancer in the body politic of the United States of America is simply one main thing. If we rid our body of this cancer, this one thing, all of a sudden, you're going to see many parts of our body get well and be able to function again. The one thing that must be corrected is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Fred Smith's Federal Express. And anyone who wants to grind on that later, after this is over, it's easy to prove. The Federal Reserve System is not federal. It is owned by private banks. And the private banks issue the money and control the credit, do they not? Just like Thomas Jefferson said. And now, if you are an American, if you are a newborn babe, the American birthright is bestowed upon you. It should be the most priceless thing on earth, and yet it comes with a price tag of $42,000 today and growing every day through compound interest. Now, how is that, Mom and Dad, Grandpa and Grandma? Is that a wonderful legacy to leave those who follow you, allowing them to be debt slaves on the continent that was conquered by our fathers? It is a time, my friends, that we gird up our loins. It is a time that we look truthfully. And it is a time that you start asking other presidential candidates, when you call in on the talk shows, if they ever appear before you, anywhere, everywhere, if it is Bob Packwood, if it is your county, one of your county commissioners or a city representative, ask them about the Federal Reserve. The other day, someone asked on a nationwide radio program, H. Ross Perot, what are you going to do about the Federal Reserve? And he said, Federal Reserve? What's wrong with that? Now, do you think that that is just stupidity? Or do you think that that is honestly an honest answer? That a person just doesn't know, who has $3 billion in his bank account, what the Federal Reserve is? How can we get rid of the Federal Reserve? Now, when I first took this job as a presidential candidate on, I didn't do it lightly. You may want to play for the Raiders, but by golly, you had better be capable of playing. You might want to be the quarterback, but you'd better be able to lead them to victory before you put on the helmet and the uniform. Don't suit up unless you are ready and willing and capable of doing the job. And so I had to think about it for a while. How are we going to get America, first of all, out of debt? Secondly, how are we going to get America back under sovereignty? And third, how are we going to get America back on her feet as a healthy nation? World Health Organization says it's going to cost America $1.5 trillion a year, per year, just tending to those who have AIDS within the next few years. Friends, we can't afford that. Something has got to change. Charles Boucher, our Comptroller General, says the national debt will redouble again in the next few years. Why? Compound interest, friends. It's not Reaganomics. It's compound interest that does it. So how are you going to solve it? We all know what's wrong. How do we solve it? Well, when I finally had the answers, and you know the answers are not complex at all, I think the most confounding things on the world are made simple by God Almighty. And you know, every one of the answers to what I have just said are found in a very simple document. It's called the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. If we'll just use that as a building plan, someone, the bankers, have taken apart our country our constitutional republic. And now we have a plan to rebuild it the right way and do it right the first time. And so here's how it is. John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1963 decided that America was going to go back on a silver and gold standard. And so in June of '63, he signed an executive order that began to print these United States notes. Now, the significant thing about them, because here's a Federal Reserve note, this Federal Reserve note has nothing behind it. There's no gold, there's no silver. It is a fiat money system. But this note right here has a debt attached, about 50 cents, and it's compounded annually. Well, this one right here has nothing behind it, the way that it was made, but there's no interest. And it could be because this right here says that this is to certify that there is on deposit within the Treasury of the United States of America $1. Is this $1? It is not. This is $1 right here. But this gets you this. This is an insurance against inflation. It is an insurance against depression. The only time America had a tremendous depression was right after the Federal Reserve got in and they started printing this, which is worthless. And they cut off the money supply. And was there any great drought across America during the Great Depression? Was there any loss of manpower due to war? Were there any pestilence, any scourges? Did we not have any manufacturing ability? What happened in the Great Depression? The banks turned off their Federal Reserve notes, and as a result, our economy, the blood of the economy, is the currency dried up. So what we do, and see how hard this is, we are going to go back to a gold, because that is money, and silver standard. How hard is it? Well, here is how easy it is. On January the 21st, that is the inauguration day, as I have taken the oath of allegiance, the very first thing I will say, because they're going to try to take the microphone away from me, because they know what's coming up. And I'm going to grab the mic and say, as of this day, I am resurrecting John Fitzgerald Kennedy's executive order, which authorizes the printing of United States notes in lieu of Federal Reserve notes until we go back on a gold and silver standard. Now, how hard was that? Now, the Spotlight newspaper has said, Bo can't do that. Listen, I'm not the Spotlight. I'm not Willis Carto. I do know something. Willis Carto wanted to be the person who ran my campaign. And he said something to me, and I'll just be very honest with you. Willis Carto said, Bo, this is going to cost a lot of money. And the hair on the back of my neck curled up, and that's normally a testimony to me that something big time is wrong. And I was not going to be any kind of bait for the collection of funds for anybody. Not the Democrats, not the Republicans, not even Willis Carto, no one. And so I said no. And since then, of course, I've been catching a lot of flack from all quarters. But there's an old saying in combat, when you're catching flack, where are you? You're on target. That's exactly right. And so in the Spotlight, they say, Bo can't do that. Friends, JFK already did. And so don't tell me like a bumblebee that I can't fly. I don't care if you are from Northrop Avionics University. Bumblebee doesn't know it, so he does. JFK started it, so I'm going to continue it. I will resurrect the John Fitzgerald Kennedy executive order. Now, Reagan has put it to bed, but I'm going to resurrect it. And we are going to go back to a gold and silver standard. And that isn't just lips moving, because you should require everyone, whether it's a city councilman, whether it's a U.S. senator, whether it's a presidential candidate, require them to write it in a contract. So there will be a contract here in Oregon. Richard Flowers will be helping to make up that contract, and some of the people that are helping us in the various towns around the Oregon area. You make sure that your voice is heard. I'll sign the contract. Contract law is very powerful. There are two sides. For your support, then I sign the contract to do everything that is on there. If I fail to do it, it's simple. You don't have to recall, you don't have to impeach. You just fire me, because that will be part of the contract. But there's not one thing that I'm telling you that I have not figured out very carefully, and I don't care if Spotlight, New York Times, CNN, Mr. Ted Turner, or whatever the other guy's name is up there in New York has got too much money, what they say is, can anyone here say that I cannot do this? By golly, I will do it, and I'm going to do it because it is written in the Constitution. And if it doesn't square with the Constitution, friends, it is not law. And so we are perfectly on our legal rights. We're on firm ground doing this. Now, that's the first thing that we do. Secondly, it is part of the Communist Manifesto that you have an indirect tax on the people. When you compare the Bill of Rights and you lay it beside the Communist Manifesto, which do you think we are following today? You know, the Manifesto of Communism. And so the second thing we do is we get rid of the income tax because it is unconstitutional. Now again, Spotlight newspaper has come out and said, and at least God bless Spotlight, because one thing, I'm not against Spotlight newspaper. They are a needful thing. You're going to read articles in there that you don't see printed in the New York Times or the LA Times or Catherine the Great's Washington Post. But the point is, they again have said, Bo can't do this. Bush lip. How do we get rid of the income tax? You see, we know what's wrong, so how do we correct it? Well, see what's wrong with this. Bill Benson, a man that I was with about a month ago in Chicago, I think they tried to kill him in prison. But Bill was in a wheelchair when I saw him about a month ago, but now he's standing up on walkers. He went into prison a whole man. Bill Benson has 17,000 documents that he has collected from every state house of every state that was there in 1913 when the 16th Amendment, the income tax, was passed, allegedly passed. It proves that the 16th Amendment was never ratified. Friend, is there any statute of limitations? I want you to think about it, because people are going to say he can't do it. Bush lip, you watch us. We're going to take Capitol Hill, and we're going to get back on our feet as a healthy, solvent nation, and here's how we do it. We send a special presidential delegation. There'll be one person going to each state house, because Benson told me the other day, he said, Bo, you don't have to do that. I've already got all the documents. But I told him, Bill, you'll be in charge of this commission, but we have to do this, because it has to be official, does it not? That presidential delegation has one purpose. Were the amendments, because we're going to do more than check just the 16th. If we had the 16th foisted upon us, what do you think about the 17th? And what do you think about the other amendments? So we're going to check them all, just to make sure. When they come back, do you think they're going to say that the 16th Amendment was never properly ratified? If they do find that, what happens to the 16th Amendment? All right, it is null and void. Now, what is the point of law? Here's the question. Ask it yourself. Get your lawyer to answer it. There is no statute of limitations on continuing fraud. The income tax is unconstitutional. It says right in our Constitution, the people will not have an indirect tax levied on them, not indirect apportionment. And by golly, that's the income tax is. That's why it had to be an amendment, because it is unconstitutional. So all of a sudden, the income tax is history, and what goes with it? An organization that should be called the Gestapo, an outfit that would be better. Well, You know, you may say this is cruel, but I'm trying to be accurate. Wouldn't it be better if the IRS wore the black uniform of the Schutzstaff? Wouldn't it be better if they wore the high peak caps of the KGB? Because isn't that what they've become? They're the only government agency that doesn't have to follow any rules. Now, the person that's going to be busier than I am on the 21st day of January is the person who is writing out the pardons for every American citizen that has been wronged by the IRS that has ever been in prison. Now, is there anything wrong with what we've done so far? You might be worried right now. You might say, well, Bo, what about jobs for the IRS? They'll have jobs. They're going to be filling sandbags. Because do you think that the international bankers, when we get rid of the Federal Reserve, are just going to roll up their little red carpet, stick it under their arm, report back to Rothschild, the Bilderbergers, the Club of Rome in Europe, and say, sorry, boss, they routed us out. It was just like old Hickory's time. What do you want us to do? They aren't going to go down easy, are they? It's not going to be easy, is it? But will it be worth it? Yes, it will. Not for us. I've lived a great life. I can go out here in the woods right now because I'm prepared to do that better than anything and live off what you have right here in the state of Oregon without ever going to the 7-Eleven again. But can you imagine that? No mall for the rest of your life. But the fact is that it will be worth it. We're doing it for those that we've brought into this world because that's what our fathers did for us. We're the first generation, folks. I'm talking grandmas here and maybe some great-grandparents, and we're the first people, the first generation, to leave our children less of a nation than we inherited. We cannot do that. Is there anything I've said so far that cannot be done just as simply and easily? When am I going to get rid of the IRS and the income tax? The hand is about right here. Because how long did it take in order to get rid of the Federal Reserve? It said, as of this day, I am resurrecting John Fitzgerald Kennedy's 1963 executive order authorizing the printing of United States notes. The hand's about right here. And I am sending 48 special delegates to each state house to determine whether or not the 16th Amendment was ever ratified, because if it wasn't, it is not law, and it is hereby null and void. Hand is right here. Didn't take very long, did it? Now, the next thing we've got to do is we must secure our sovereignty. The Senate has already determined that the UN mandates, the UN Charter, is supreme even to our Constitution. But does that mean that it's so? It does not. And so what will I, as a chief executive officer, and can I do this alone, by the way? Oh, no. But I'm going to call you to serve. And some of you may say, but Bo, I love it out here in the West. I don't want to move back to that cesspool. I don't want to go to Washington, District of Criminals. But you're going to be called. If you can balance a checkbook, aren't you more qualified to serve than those that are there today? And so there will be an army of 16,000. We will be led by the fife and drums from Oregon. That is a promise. It's part of the contract. We will march down Pennsylvania Avenue rather than being driven in a limousine, and we will establish our foothold on Capitol Hill the day we take that oath of allegiance. And on that day, I am going to make it very clear that as the chief executive, I will pull us out of the United Nations before I will see our sovereignty surrendered to any foreign power. Now, I don't know about you. You may believe that AIDS came from green monkeys. You may also believe that your ancestors climbed out of the ocean as slime. Mine did not. Some of yours may have. Just because that's all you can teach in the school system today doesn't mean that it's true. There's a lot of other things that they're teaching in there that aren't true either. AIDS, I don't believe, came from green monkeys, and I think you can take a look at Africa because the World Health Organization has stated Africa is a continent that is lost. Now, Africa is a rich continent in natural resources. What do you think is going on here in the United States of America? Almost every day you lose more of your state. And if it isn't in Oregon that more of your resources are being sequestered by the federal government, it's in some other state. Alaska has all but disappeared as a state. Nevada's in the same position. Almost every state has been taken away. Why? Who is going to pay the debt when the foreigners and the banks that have bought up the $4 trillion, which is compounding every year and will redouble again in the next few, who's going to pay it when it comes due in the next 4 to 5 years? That's why you're not going to be voting as Americans in '96. Because the foreclosure, I think, will simply be the President's declaration of a national emergency which says, friends, America, with all of our lifestyle, we have corrupted ourselves, we are in debt, we cannot pay it, we're being foreclosed upon, but there is an answer. It is called the Declaration of Interdependence, of which both of your senators, shame on you, signed the Declaration of Interdependence. It says that our resources are global resources. Therefore, if we will surrender our resources to those that we owe our debt to, then this debt will be forgiven. Isn't that what they did to Brazil? The international bank said, we will repudiate the debt if you will simply give us all of your resources in all perpetuity. That's what they tried to do in the Philippines with Marcos. He said no, and you saw what happened to Marcos. And so is it beginning to come through what's happening here in America? That's why they're taking your Douglas fir. That's why, do you know that Oregon, now Nevada is called the Silver State, but Oregon has the same resources beneath the soil that they have in the state of Nevada. You just haven't fully developed it yet because your state has been especially blessed with a fishing industry and with a lumber industry. But those are tremendous resources which are going to be turned over. Do you see that? And George Bush made the statement, you want jobs, I'll give you jobs overseas. Good. Better known, baloney is a word, but better known as bush lip, if you don't mind. I think bush lip covers almost anything that is said by conventional politicians in the 1990s. But thank you. And so that's why it's essential that we get back under this sovereignty business. We've got to take AIDS on head to head. Lorraine Day has agreed to be the Surgeon General. Lorraine Day, glad some of you know her. She should be the Surgeon General under any president, but she's going to be our Surgeon General. She's not even going to wear a uniform, she said. Lorraine Day, for some of you who may not know her, was the chief orthopedic surgeon in San Francisco General Hospital. Some of her best friends, surgeons, were dying, yet they were taking all the normal precautions. And they were not AIDS prone, and yet they were being killed by the AIDS virus. And so Lorraine Day began to do her own research. She's written a book. We carry it because it's one of the really great books that you need to have and to read and to pass on. Lorraine Day found out the Center for Disease Control is not telling the American people the truth about AIDS. Her book is called AIDS, What the Government Isn't Telling You. And I don't want to get into it too deep, but let me just bring out a few things. Does the AIDS virus live outside the body? It does. For how long? Good. Well, see, a lot of people are alert here. There's only 3 kinds of folks in the world that I've found. There's those who cause things to happen. I think you're here. Much greater group is those that wait, do they not, for something to happen? Finally, there is that group that just goes and wonders what happened after it's already occurred. So I can tell that you guys are already up to speed. Can AIDS virus infiltrate intact skin? Yes, it can. How does it do this? Well, Lorraine Day determined, through the Center for Disease Control, that the porosity, the size of the AIDS virus is, on a scale, it is a 1. And what is the porosity factor of the condoms that they're giving to high school students for safe sex nowadays? What is the porosity factor of the mask, of the gloves? It is 4 to 5. What does this mean? It means the AIDS virus goes through it like a Volkswagen driving into this room. And so that's why these surgeons were dying of AIDS, that were not AIDS prone. We've got to stop this business, because I think one of the lures of the New World Order will be, you accept our mark and we will give you the therapy that will keep you AIDS free. Well, now, do you believe that we have, think about it for a moment, do we have cures for AIDS and cancer right now in the USA? Yes, we do. With everybody's knowing it, how come we don't have it available? Because if right now, if you call the AMA or you talk to the Food and Drug Administration, they will tell you the only cures for AIDS are surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. Does that mean it's true? Does not mean it's true. Why? In combat, we use a thing called ozone. If you have gangrene, ozone is applied to the area and the decayed skin is evaporated. It is done away with. All bacteria is destroyed. In Moscow today, the world's largest ozone generator exists. All the water in Moscow is purified. All virus, all bacteria is killed by ozone. Now, I'm not a doctor, but here's something that's on the contract for every state in the Union. There will not be an AMA doctor running the Food and Drug Administration. It's going to be a holistic medicine person, someone that understands living better through chemistry may be better for the chemical companies, but not for the American people. We're going to have people in the bureaucracy. Everybody clear on that? We're going to have people in there who understand how to live with alternative medicines, preventative medicines. For example, in Texas, I want to try to show it to you. All of this stuff is in your document packet and a lot more besides, but in Texas, here's what's happening. All of these things are being pulled off the shelves by the Food and Drug Administration. Now let me just run down just a few of them. COQ10, tea tree oil, herbs and herbal products, flax oil, vitamin C, aloe vera, calcium, multivitamins. Yeah. Now, this is in Texas, but Texas is the first domino. Texas is one of the largest areas of health food stores. When this gets done there, this is in your document packet, it's going to go to every state in the Union. Why are they doing this? They're not just doing it so that you have to go to a doctor and get a prescription so that you buy these same things from pharmaceutical houses like DuPont, but they are doing it so you cannot control your own health, because you won't be issued these things by prescription in the amounts that you might use them as an individual. And so now how do we do this? Can Bo Gritz do this? Oh, listen how easy this one is. This doesn't have to wait until the 21st day of January. The 3rd day of November, we're having a general election. On the 4th, we will know who has won. I'm going to send a little yellow stickum to George Bush that says, put a pink slip in with every check of all 16,000 people that you appoint, because every one of them is fired as of the 21st day of January. Now, in the Reagan Revolution, less than 10% of the bureaucracy was changed. Do you understand why? It's like human sewage that packs the bureaucracy. We can't have clean government until we rout it out. And how do we rout it out? You don't have transition periods. You fire every one of them. And then we are identifying now, and that's why Jerry Gillespie exists. He's this real ugly fellow over here at the table by my beautiful bride. Jerry Gillespie is our national campaign coordinator. If you want to volunteer, some of you won't be given a chance. I'm going to draft you because I know you and your talents. You're going to Washington, D.C. to help us serve. But if you want to volunteer and you have special interest, I don't care whether it's in petroleums, because we're going to have alternative fuels, friend. Why should we be dependent upon Arab oil? If we were to... And was there a 100-mile-per-gallon carburetor? My gosh, when I was a kid they had them. And so why don't we have them today? Well, it's the same reason. I'm going to read you this as part of your document packet. This is the solicitation for charitable purposes card. Anytime someone asks you, would you help a hungry child? Would you help the homeless? If you have time, you can stop and say, you know, that sounds like a worthy cause. Could I kindly see your solicitation for charitable purposes card? Because they have to have one, or they cannot be out there soliciting unless you're just a bum on the street. And then they will produce it. It is normal. This is the normal size, this right here, very small print. But if you adjust your eyes and begin to read, it'll tell you where the money goes. And isn't that interesting? The national guidelines are that from 7 to 15% of money collected should actually go for what it's being collected for. Now, this is the solicitation for charitable purposes card for the National Cancer Research Center. Let me have some guesses. Let me have some ideas of how much money of every dollar goes. Now, let's listen. National, that's all states. Cancer, only one purpose. Research Center. Now, how much? 8 cents. Do I have more? That's pretty skeptical. 1 cent. 91 cents goes to cancer research. 0.91. 0.91. That's less than 1%. That's pretty, isn't that pretty skeptical? Okay, let me read it to you. This is in your document packet. This is the things that people need to wake up to. This is why we don't have cost-efficient, effective cancer cures and AIDS cure. Lorraine Day was with us the other day, and she said that at the last time she attended the United States Health Organization meeting, that she found the director of the Cancer Research Center had become the director of AIDS research, because there's more money to be made in AIDS research than there is cancer research. But in cancer research, here it is, quote, the Watson and Huey Company gets 57.04% of every dollar because they are the publicist. Now, 35.05% goes for the advertising and for the radio and television and this kind of thing. 7.37% goes to the administrators. What does this leave? This leaves, right here in their own language, 0.54 of 1%. That is 1/2 penny goes of each dollar to cancer research. Now, do you understand why we don't have effective cures? If Moscow can purify all of its water using ozone where a virus or bacteria cannot exist, what does that mean happens to the AIDS virus? What does that mean happens to cancer when that same oxygen therapy is applied to the human body? Now, I'm not the doctor, but I believe that we have these cost-efficient cures. If it works in combat, if it works in Moscow, it ought to be working for you. And it costs about 15 cents, though, for oxygen therapy. As a matter of fact, H2O2, what is that? Hydrogen peroxide is one of the things that doesn't that also talk to a high content of oxygen? If virus and bacteria can't exist, could these possibly be cures for these heinous diseases? My heavens. And at what, 15 cents a session? Now you know why we don't have them. But we will have. Does everybody understand, please, that on November 4th, we put them on notice? January 21st, 16,000. Can the president do that? Yes. This song back here was given to me in Oregon by a gentleman who was a U.S. Senate candidate, and I understand he's dropped out. I'm sorry to hear it. But he came up to me and he said, "Bo, you need a theme song, and I think I've got it for you." And he gave me the music and the lyrics. There's only one thing wrong with this in 1992. Instead of 10,000, it is 16,000. It's everybody from the State Department through the CIA chief, through the Federal Communications Commission, to the Interstate Commerce Commission, you name it, the president hires them. If he hires them, I can fire them. Once they're all fired, we're going to put new people in. I've got to have volunteers that are capable. If you can balance a checkbook, I've already told you, you're more capable than you believe. And I'm looking primarily for senior citizens because I am going to be your field general. I'm not going to tell you how to run your department. I'm going to tell you to run it honestly, to run it uprightly, and to run it with one agenda, the healing of America. I don't care if you're the head of the CIA or the FBI or what you are. You have one agenda. Now, it's up to you to run that department, and you know, that's why, and again, I've got criticized a lot because they said Bo Gritz is going to take Capitol Hill with grandmas. Better watch out, because 16,000 harder than woodpecker-lipped grandmas can get through almost anything. A question I should have answered. How do we pay for government when we get rid of the income tax? Well, let's just analyze it a little bit, because I asked myself this question. I said, you know, income tax is unconstitutional. That's why they had to pass an amendment. It is part of the Communist Manifesto. I said, but how will we pay for government without the income tax? Isn't the answer simple? Go back to the master architect's plan. What is this plan? The Constitution. And how does it say we pay for government? Well, it's pretty simple. First of all, I said, let's see, when did we have income tax? Started in 1913. Well, what is this year now? This is 1992. And so for 79 years, we have had income tax. But for 125 years, we didn't have any income tax. How did we pay for government without income tax? Go back to the Constitution. You find all the answers there. What does it say? It says you pay for government by excise tax, by impost, by tariffs, by duties, and if needs be, by a thing called direct apportionment. Can we pay for government with free trade? You cannot. When George Bush is advocating a fast track for free trade, what is he trying to accelerate? He's trying to accelerate the New World Order, because the faster he gets us on our knees to lick the hands that feed us, the faster we won't be able to vote. That's why the national emergencies coming from all the good conservative Republicans, because they're following the party line. That's why we've got to strip away these party lines. We're going to be Americans, not Republicrats, not right-left. And how are we going to do that? Let me very quickly clarify it, because this is part of the contract. As of January 21st, I'm going to write an executive order. I don't think executive orders are constitutional. But see if you will agree with this one. We're going to resurrect the Kennedy order. We're going to write one executive order. That executive order says that as of the 20th day of February, that's 30 days later, every federal elected official, that's the president, the vice president, and everyone in Congress, has their wages cut in half. Now, why would I do that? Let's think about it. I was going to include the federal judges, but you got to read the Constitution. And the spotlight says, Bo can't do this. Bush lip, Carto lip, call it whatever you want to. Can the president write an executive order? He most certainly can. They have written over 11,000 of them. Has one ever been vetoed in the history of the United States? It has not. How do executive orders work? The president writes them. He sends them over to Congress. Congress has 30 days to either approve it or to veto it by 2/3 majority of each house. If they don't veto it within 30 days, it becomes law. The same as if Congress were to send a bill to the president that had been approved of both houses, and the president does nothing within 10 days, it becomes law, unless he vetoes it. And so why would I do this? Cut the pay in half. You can't do it for the federal judges because the Constitution says no, but it doesn't say anything about not cutting the pay of Congress and the executive branch. And so we are. The reason, in a time when we've had more unemployment than any other time in the world, at a time we've got more bankruptcies, more than 1 million bankruptcies in the last 12 months, all-time record, more homeless, all of a sudden the Congress writes itself into the top 10% of all wage earners. Something's wrong with that picture. How many years do you have to work in order to retire as a congressman? 5 years. At the end of 5 years, how much do you retire with? 100%. Yeah, some of you are saying, whoops, I didn't know that. 100%. Isn't it good to be Congress? Congress are not patriots. If you have to pay a patriot, you got the wrong person. Congress are profiteers. Congress has turned out to be the best money can buy. They have made the word politics, as I've said, go down to the bottom along with whale droppings. Now, by cutting their pay in half, what do? First of all, you look to the east. If you're not with me in Washington, D.C., and you see a dark brown cloud, that is the shoe leather burning with all those lawyers shuffling around in the Capitol building trying to figure out what they're going to do with this executive order. If they veto it, what does it do? It will identify every turkey in Congress who is a profiteer. And in 1994, we're going to have a turkey shoot in Congress. Figuratively, you're going to shoot them out of office, will you not? Shame on you if you don't. By 1996, I can see a real American Congress. Now, what we're doing is we're getting started here with people that are willing now to start running against the Republicans. They don't have the money that Bob Packwood has got. They don't have the political action committees. They don't have the war chest. But if they will put together a contract, maybe it'll get the kind of publicity that will cause people to wake up. And so that's what I intend to do as I start out. And it's going to be a rather interesting first few days. And you should know that I am not bulletproof. And if I were by myself, I would never make it, probably, to the podium to take the oath of allegiance. But I'm going to have 16,000 of you with me, and I've noticed that the pipe major is a rather portly lad, and so he's going to be leading this procession. So I'm going to be fairly safe until I get there. I have a man who will be with me. His name is Cy Manette. He is harder than woodpecker lips. You should know he too is a Christian. More than that, he's a constitutionalist. If anything happens to me, Cy Manette from Kerrville, Texas, 62 years old, retired fighter pilot. Here we got Charlie Brown, who is a Navy chief. We don't pay him anything. He's the national campaign manager. You want to get something done, you get a Navy chief. He may steal. I don't know how Charlie gets us to where we're going, but he's going to do it. I've got myself an Air Force fighter pilot as a vice president. All I'm looking for is a Marine. We got any Marines? Golly, see there? They're out there waiting, or they're wondering what's going to happen. We need some good Marines just so we can flesh this thing out. By the way, in my book over there, if you are a Marine, I've put 165 pages of pictures so that you'll have something to look at. And if you were a sailor, if you were in the Navy, we'll give you a crayon so that you can connect the dots, because there's some blank pages in the back. We want to have a little something for everybody now to do with Call to Serve. What was I talking about with the mark of the beast? Now, this is very serious. There's 2 points I want to make, and then I'm going to answer your questions. One is on the prisoners of war. The second is on the mark of the beast. And I think that we'll get to it first, if it's all right. This thing is real. Mary Rolfe is a Christian writer. She puts out a little book. It's $4.95. It's mislabeled. It says, "When Your Money Fails." We carry it as part of the Center for Action because it's one of the finest books, I think, that's on the market today that you need to pass around to your friends. It ought to probably be labeled America in Prophecy, because she has taken all of the biblical scriptures from Daniel, Ezekiel, all the way down to Revelations, and each one of these prophets had all these visions. And so if you start reading one, you get all mixed up with another one. But she's taken them and laid them all out in chronological sequence in that one little paperback so you can understand it. It's pretty good. Mary Rolfe started talking about the fact that they were using infrared lasers to tattoo fish and animals so that they could monitor various populations as they migrated and died and one thing and the other. And so Mary Rolfe had offered the theory that they would start marking people with infrared laser tattoo. About 9 months ago, we were in Idaho Falls, and a person who is a computer consultant came up to me, and purposefully, we had a dinner before the talk, sat next to me and said, "Bo, I want to make sure that what you're saying is as accurate as you can be." He said, "I've heard you talk about Mary Rolfe's laser tattoo being applied to people." He said, "It doesn't work." He said, "My credentials are that I am a computer consultant who helped the EEC, the Economic Community of Europe, set up the EAN system, European Article Numbering System. We call it the Uniform Product Code. It is the barcode." He said, "So I know what I'm talking about." He said, "This marking system is designed to mark every article on Earth, and we have almost completed that." He said, "It is also designed to mark all human beings." He said, "We will not use infrared laser tattoo." He said, "This is meant to be accepted when you come into this world as an infant. If we used a laser tattoo as the person matured, it would be distorted, or as they had living experience, it might somehow be made unusable, and that is your bank account. It is going to be everything, because the ultimate design is a cashless system where everything is electronic. It is a credit-debit system." He said, so the laser tattoo is being applied to animals, but it's only temporary. He said, for human beings, we have already developed a microchip that is smaller than a grain of rice, that is injectable under the skin using a normal hypodermic. It will be non-toxic. It will be enclosed in a thin membrane. It is designed to last all your life. And on this microchip will be all of the information about you. And when you are paid, simply you will be scanned by a wand, and whatever the pay is will be credited to your account. And when you purchase things, you will simply be scanned by the wand, and whatever it is you want to purchase will be debited to your account. He said, this is a wonderful concept. It is a wonderful system. He said it gets rid of crime and drugs because, he said, it gets rid of money. And money is the root of all evil. And I just paused and said, isn't love? No, he said, don't be technical. If we get rid of money, we have gotten rid of crime and drugs. Can you see the President of the United States in the form of Bill Clinton or George Bush saying that? If we get rid of money, we get rid of crime and drugs. Why do you think? Now, this is one of the new, I don't have many of them, this is $100 Fern. Federal Foreign Reserve note. Was that a Freudian slip? I don't think so. This has a metal strip. I don't know if you can see it or not, but if you were me and you look right up here, going right across this number, there is a metal strip that goes through the new currency. It is in the hundreds, in the 50s. It's going to be put in the 20s. It's already in the 50s and the hundreds. It's going to be put in the 10s, but not the 5s and the 1s. They're too small. Why is the metal strip being put in there? Well, as we walk through the metal detectors in the airports, it's for security. They can determine whether or not you have anything on that might be used as a weapon. When we go to the cashless system, people are going to try and hoard American currency all over the world because American currency is a world standard. I'll tell you what, this stuff spends everywhere, but American currency is second. And if you have currency, this is just like having a transponder in an aircraft. It gives off a signal. If you have currency that is marked, they will tell. They will be able to scan you and tell. And it will be a felony, and you will be immediately imprisoned. And so if you do not want to accept the mark to buy and sell your products, and you think you're going to hoard currency, think again. Because any that is so marked with this metal strip will land you in prison where you may get a PhD through my brainwashing in political science, if that's what you want. So that's why I think they've marked the new currency. Now, this fellow said that it was a wonderful system because it got rid of money. There's no crime and drugs. He said there's no counterfeiting because that is it. That's your mark. He said that it means there's no extortion. There's no wrongful use. Unless someone cuts your hand off, they're not going to be able to use. Now, where, if you don't have a hand, do you suppose this mark might be placed? Yes, isn't it kind of convenient right up here in the forehead? Because that would be equally convenient to pass a wand over. It may be true that this would get rid of some crime and drugs. It may be true that you couldn't have ransom paid anymore for kidnapping. He said you can't even cheat on your income tax because everything is done automatically by credit debit. But isn't it just a little bit too prophetic for anyone? I don't care what your religion. Gentleman came up and said he's a practicing Buddhist for 25 years. Good. I don't care whether you're a Hindu or a Jew or what you are. Isn't that just a little bit too much? And if you're not a Christian and you don't care about the Bible, you've never read Revelations, where John, 2,000 years ago, was able to see this vision, and I don't think John understood IBM or computers, but he said, I see a time when they will place a mark in the right hand. Why not the left hand? Well, because if you understand anything over in the Middle East, what you do with the left hand, you don't even present your left hand for anything. Not even to accept a drink or to pat someone. It's a disgrace. So it's in the right hand or in the forehead. He saw that. And it was a mark, he said. And it contained the number. And he said the number of man, and it was 666. Now, what is interesting, and what this gentleman did admit to, he said, Bo, it's true. The framework of the computer equation of this mark is 666. Because you got to have a start point, you got to have a middle, you got to have an end. He said, but I guarantee you there was no Luciferian malice of forethought. We didn't go in there thinking that we were doing this as a mark of the beast. He said, Bo, we could have used 111 or 333 or 999. What is the glory of God? They just happened to pick the exact number that John had seen 2,000 years ago. So if for no other reason, friends, isn't this warning enough that this is something you should stay away from? Now, of course, it says in there, and this, gosh, I hate again to give you the sermon early, but in the Geneva Bible, it said very wisely, I believe. It says, if you accept this mark. Now, this is what the theologians wrote in the margins that the Pilgrims brought when they came over here in 1600. It said, if you accept this mark, this is a divorce from Christ in the baptism of marriage that you have with Him. That's pretty well said, I think. Again, don't care what religion you are. If you're no religion, it should be significant to you that 2,000 years ago somebody copied down a vision that they said God gave them and it's coming true. And it's not coming true in some Orson Welles movie. It's coming true in the real world right here. Here's some of the literature. It says Singapore has a new ID card up its sleeve, an electronic ID to track its citizens. Very quickly, it's all in your document packet so you can look it up and read it later. Here's another one, Time Magazine, peddling Big Brother. Foreign governments are snapping up surveillance systems that are produced in the West. Here's a young girl, an Asian, showing her ID card with barcode that is her. And we have, here's two articles. I just recopied it because my original was getting pretty ratty. It didn't come out too good. But yours you can read loud and clear. Here are two articles showing where Congress is trying to get a national ID card for us with a barcode on it. And good conservative Republican Alan K. Simpson says, it does not offend me to have a national identification card. Plastic card may eliminate checks. The banks now are pushing to just have plastic rather than any check. We're moving very rapidly. Here's what's exciting, because now it comes from the card to the chip. In the 12th day of November of 1991, the City Council, by the way, your copy looks better than this, the City Council in Los Angeles passed a law that said pets would be marked with a microchip smaller than a grain of rice that would be inserted in the nape of the neck if they were fur-bearing. If they were reptiles, it goes up the other end. Where will Congress receive their mark? That's the question. Now, what is exciting about this to me is that this was November, and here's one that is dated April the 2nd of this year, microchips now being used all over the United States to mark animals. Do you think that they have researched and developed and produced a microchip smaller than a grain of rice, insertable by a normal hypodermic beneath the skin to make pet owners more responsible? It is Rip Van Winkle time, America. Friends, if we don't wake up, we're going to be like Gulliver. He was a giant, but he got tethered to the ground by threads of tyranny, and that's precisely what's happening today. I will hold aloft your banner of liberty, but I cannot march on Capitol Hill and single-handedly restore constitutional government. It's going to take the American people.
Will you take a stand? Will you decide now that you're going to do something for your country to clean up dirty government? Please join me.
And we're going to have an American government with only one agenda, and that is the healing of the United States of America.
God bless you. God bless America. God protect our prisoners of war. Join me, please.